All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new video here. So today we're going to be talking about Professor Jeffrey Sachs responding to the Trump administration's invasion of Venezuela, as well as the abduction and the capture of now deposed President Nicolas Maduro, basically saying the United States and in more particularly Donald J. Trump, the president, has absolutely no regard for international law whatsoever. So what is the current situation on the ground right now in Venezuela? Well, basically, the vice president of Venezuela has now assumed control of the country, again, under heavy duress, you can say. I mean, under direct threat from the president. Donald Trump today basically said, if she doesn't do everything we say, we're just going to remove her, kill her. I mean, it's not going to be good. Basically saying she'll suffer a fate worse than Maduro. So this is the current president of Venezuela. But the thing that's really strange, guys, is the current administration in Venezuela, it's still the Maduro regime. The regime is still in place. The only big thing here is that Maduro himself was captured. So again, it appears as though maybe a deal was struck between the now current president and the Trump administration, basically like, you're going to do everything we say until we can figure out what we're going to do here in terms of a transition. And then we're going to go from there. Because again, of course, the person in charge right now in Venezuela, she's not going to be there long, in my opinion. They're going to, I mean, again, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump just wants a permanent U.S. occupation. I mean, nothing this administration does at this point would shock me, but they're just going to look to install a U.S. puppet probably who will do basically whatever Trump and the administration want. So Jeffrey Sachs goes in basically saying Trump has no regard for the U.S. Constitution at all, no regard for international law at all. And he also says, if he gets away with this, which it appears he might, I mean, again, you're seeing the MAGA base basically not had that many problems with it. If he gets away with this, he's just going to go after Greenland. We're already seeing the threats amping up against Cuba, Greenland, and the Europeans who are basically passive about this. What are they going to do when the United States says, you know what, it's a national security threat, we need to take Greenland? What are they going to say? Probably not much, and it's totally insane what's going on. So let's get into the first clip of Jeffrey Sachs responding to President Trump's invasion and capture of Nicolas Maduro. So here's his response. And by the way, guys, if you're enjoying the content, make sure to like and subscribe. It's super good for the algorithm, and it helps with the channel immensely. And if you want to become a member, hit the join button below. Patreon is below as well. And of course, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Here's the first clip, and we'll talk about it in just a minute.
Clearly, this is a blatantly illegal act, but it's one in a long line of blatantly illegal American actions. And just in the recent days, Trump has been threatening a new country every day. He bombed Nigeria last week. He said that the U.S. would intervene in Iran if the government acts against the protesters in a way that Trump doesn't like. He has invaded Venezuela. Just recently, he created a special envoy for Greenland, declaring that Greenland will be ours. So it's a threat against Europe, which of course Europe doesn't even acknowledge or recognize because it's so passive relative to the United States. We are not in a constitutional order in the United States. We are in an order led by a military state. We do not obey the U.S. Constitution. Everything is by executive decree. When a congressman dared to mention the U.S. Constitution today, Trump said, "What is he whining about? This is ridiculous." Well, this is really, at least what Trump has done is expose the fact that we're at the end of constitutional rule in the United States. What happens when there's a thuggish rule remains to be seen. But in my view, this makes the world extraordinarily dangerous. Of course, we're hardly at the end of the story about Venezuela itself. They have arrested a president, but this is not the end of anything. The whole history of U.S. regime change operations, which number probably around 100 such operations since the end of World War II, is a record of bloodshed, violence, deliberate creation of instability, coups, assassinations, civil war. So we don't know what will come next, but we know that there's been thuggery. It's also interesting, though it's maybe I don't have a definitive count of it, but I've not noticed any of the mainstream media in the United States even raising a question about this. The New York Times, the so-called paper of record, did not one time in recent weeks say, oh, it wouldn't be a good idea to brazenly attack that country. The editorial board was completely silent. As far as I can see, it remains silent. Our Congress is moribund. It doesn't exist, in fact, in any operational sense. So I find all of this very dramatic and extremely worrisome, though I hasten to repeat, we're not at the end of the story by any means of what will transpire in Venezuela itself. There is a government in place. There is a military. There is a mobilized part of society. There's lots of guns around. This is not a simple, smooth takeover by the United States as much as Donald Trump might believe so.
Okay, so again, he starts it off by saying it's an illegal act. You cannot really just go into a country without congressional authorization just from domestic law. And of course, under international law, you can't just start invading countries if there's no imminent threat, which of course the Venezuelan military was not about to invade America. It's complete BS. And of course, the indictment against Maduro actually and his wife, there's no mention of fentanyl in the indictment, which of course it's kind of weird because the justification for that or for going into Venezuela was of course because of fentanyl. So it's kind of weird the indictment doesn't even mention fentanyl, it just mentions cocaine. So that is really weird. And of course, he brings up the fact, again, the Trump administration and Trump himself, of course, campaigned on a platform of anti-war, and we're just going to stop with these regime change stuff. It's not worth it. We're not going to do it. And a lot of people actually bought into it. Again, I've been on the channel for a while now talking about basically that's not true. Even before the election, of course, Trump is an anti-war. But he brings up, Trump in the last couple of weeks has bombed Nigeria. He's openly threatening Greenland. He's bombed Yemen. He's bombed Iran. And it appears we're going to go into Iran again. He made another threat against the Iranian regime the last few days. He's bombed Syria. I mean, it just goes on and on. He hasn't ended the war in Russia-Ukraine like he said he would when he was president-elect. I mean, it's just a joke at this point how anyone can just buy this stuff and they think it's okay. And, it really is ridiculous because, hey, he can just do what he wants. It really is the law of the jungle. And what is the U.S. going to do when China invades Taiwan? What is the moral high ground that's going to be taken? There is none. There just is none because the U.S. just invades whoever they want. And you know what? The Chinese are going to invade Taiwan and it's going to be like, okay, well, what are the U.S. going to say? They're going to take the moral high ground? Of course, there is none. And it's so true what he says. At least Trump is kind of just showing the constitutional era is just over. The Constitution means nothing to this administration at all. They don't care at all. And he brings up a congressman, I believe it was Thomas Massey, who said, you have to go to Congress, and Rand Paul, you have to go to Congress to get authorization to start bombing countries. And basically Trump said, oh, just stop whining. And that really is all you need to know. They have no respect for international and just domestic law at all. At all. They have none whatsoever. And again, it is true that he brings up the mainstream media, for example. Mainstream media is honestly it seems relatively on board with this, which tells you all you need to know about the media apparatus in this country. And he also says, hey, this is not the end of the Venezuelan conflict at all. Because again, there's a lot of guerrilla groups in the country. Who knows how the transition is going to be? Who knows how the population is going to react to a U.S. military intervention, especially if it's a permanent or at least temporary occupation by U.S. forces once a transition starts to take place. So there's so many unanswered questions, and it is kind of reminiscent to George Bush saying in 2003, mission accomplished, and we all know what came after that. So totally insane. And then he's going to bring up in the next clip, I'm going to show you how, hey, the Europeans are being relatively passive about this right now. But, Trump is kind of saber-rattling when it comes to Greenland and openly threatening Greenland, saying, yeah, it's ours. So I think that's going to happen at some point. And Jeffrey Sachs seems to agree. So here's a point Jeffrey Sachs makes about the U.S. might be invading Greenland and the Europeans are going to be caught with their pants down. So here's a clip and we'll talk about it in just a second.
I think that this is just extraordinarily worrisome to have an unhinged, undisciplined, crude bully, absolutely lawless, absolutely disrespectful of any norms as president of the United States, and to have no counterweight whatsoever in Europe, not a voice for decency or international law. And for the rest of the world, well, I suppose that Russia and China are watching. They have said this is obviously a crass violation. They're not going to intervene in the Western Hemisphere. But what has happened is simply another step of completely dismantling of the institutions and lessons that we once thought we had learned from World War I and World War II and had installed, however fragilely, in the United Nations system and in international law. It barely exists. The UN is in the same situation today as the League of Nations was in its defunct period in the late 1930s and early 1940s. It essentially is useless right now. And I'm sorry to say it because I've been working for and with the UN for 25 years, but the US has disowned it, is trying deliberately to destroy it. And while one hoped that the rest of the world would rally to its defense, we see that Europe is silent. And our lights went out. I'm in the Himalayas right now, so but I don't see what is needed right now, which is the rest of the world rallying to the cause that this can't stand in this way. Maybe in the first hours, one shouldn't expect this, and maybe more will come, but it's a very, very alarming period. The US is deliberately out to rip up any semblance or shred of international law. I don't know how Europe will feel when the United States invades Greenland, but don't be surprised when it happens. Trump has announced it. He has announced it again and again, and it's very, very likely to happen. One day, Trump will say we have a national emergency, and Greenland will be occupied. And then probably Europe will say, oh, thank you, U.S. It could have been worse. This is how things are right now. Principles, who needs them?
Okay, so again, once again, I think he's 100% correct where he says, again, Trump is just, he views his position in the world as sort of like a bully, completely lawless, devoid of any sort of norms whatsoever. I mean, this is totally insane. These sort of imperialistic land grabs. I mean, it's like we're back in the 1980s again. It's completely insane. And he brings up the Europeans as well. And I do think the reason why they're being so passive on issues such as this and Trump saber rattling with Greenland, for example, and Denmark, is because they need the United States as sort of a cudgel between Russia and Ukraine. They need the United States in that negotiation, which of course is super important geopolitically for the Europeans. And he's right. The post-World War II order is sort of broken down. The UN is worthless in the sense international law means nothing. It really is the law of the jungle. These countries will do whatever they want. It's about a power. It's all about power. It's all about power between the great powers, China, Russia, the United States. They don't care about the UN at all. It's just completely illegal, and it doesn't even matter. There's not going to be any sort of punishment for the United States for this. And he compares this to the League of Nations in the late 1930s, where, yeah, the League of Nations, similar to the UN, with its international order, they weren't able to stop Hitler. They weren't able to stop anything because they were, again, a sort of worthless organization. They had no sort of power mechanisms or no way of enforcement, basically. And that's kind of what we're seeing with the UN right now as well. And, again, he says the U.S. might just invade Greenland. Trump has said it. You have Katie Miller, Stephen Miller's wife, just posting like pictures of Greenland under a U.S. flag. I mean, the entire thing is just completely insane. But I think Jeffrey Sachs has a number of good points here in this interview saying, this is it. I mean, the United States is the Trump administration does not care about the law at all. They're going to invade whoever they want, whenever they want. It is an absolute disgrace what's going on right now. And what comes next is anyone's guess. But scary times out there. It appears the U.S. and Israel are about to invade Iran, or at least bomb Iran again, looking for another regime change in a matter of days. Just totally insane stuff. So that's what I got for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think of this interview. Let me know what you think of this video. Again, drop in the comment section. Make sure to like and subscribe. And of course, if you want to become a member, hit the join button below. Hit the Patreon link below as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you guys later.